Okay, let's get this started. So we're going to go straight to the audience. That's the new thing today, see? It's always new here. We'll just go right up there to the back. Deborah, you want to? Oh, and also, could you just say your name before you speak? Someone suggested that, and I think it's kind of a nice thing.
All right, my name is Matt. My question is I guess more directly geared towards Laurie Joe.
Where are
I'm right
you?
here.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry, there's a column. Sorry. But others can address it too. I was quite honestly kind of struck by how diverse the representation of people was in your pictures. And the question that I have is, if artists are indeed going to cross the threshold into doing public projects, and I feel like we need to take some responsibility and tips from organizers in terms of undermining privilege. And I'm just wondering, what strategies do you employ in your work that allows you to temper your good intentions but at the same time offer your talents and time and energy in a way that supports and seeks leadership from primary stakeholders rather than undermines it? Because I feel like that's a huge problem in a lot of public practice work.
Oh, do you want to?
Yeah. Well, actually, we experimented. First of all, I don't define myself primarily as an artist. This project was a big collaboration between criminal justice activists and policymakers and architects and planners and graphic designers and artists. So it stands in for a lot. But one of the things I'm actually most proud of in the project is that the person I collaborated with at the beginning was very convinced that you had to talk to policymakers in one way, and you had to talk to community people in another way, and you had to talk to, the art world in a third way. And in fact, the communication strategy really works across all of those things. And I really have tested it in all of those terrains. So if you think something differently, I'm very open to talking about it. We have a lot of PDFs on our website. We've distributed free pamphlets. So really the communication, the part of the project is the communication strategy that we try and use the same images and data and maps to communicate across a bunch of audiences. So I hope you think that works.
But I just want to see if we can just address it too. Just this question of privilege is certainly one that, first of all, I think that word's so coded, and I keep thinking how much we speak in a loaded U.S.-specific framework. So I'm wondering if we could just unpack what that word kind of means in terms of activist land, and then maybe just Laurie Jo, do you think you could talk about that at all in terms of terms of just what that word means, and then frankly how you work through those difficulties?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. But I also think that truly the way to build diverse coalitions and overcome some of these problems, is just simply to do the hard work of building coalitions. And that hard work isn't necessarily having workshops on privilege or, stuff like that. It's actually just getting out there and doing the work, going to meetings, going to churches, going to, I just can't tell you the number of places and community centers and, everywhere that we just went. And when people see that you have good intentions, I feel like they recognize that, and that is what motivates them to work with you, period. So for me, it really just hasn't been an issue for our campaign. Nada, what else did you want? Did you want to talk about privilege?
I just think sometimes people don't know what that means. That word's activist. Not everybody does that kind of U.S.-based activist stuff. Are the people in the room to know what that word is geared towards? Sorry, this word privilege, I'll just go at it, sorry. The word's basically talking about power and about people's ability to go into kind of this idea of going into neighborhoods of lack of privilege as someone with privilege, white, male, Caucasian, upper middle class, education, whatever, these ideas that one has more power, social power, and then somehow, how does one undercut or be reflexive about their access and privilege as a way of organizing? This is something that's in activist land as an important thing to think through when working with people. And it's true that being aware of one's power is a way that one has to work, right? I mean, maybe Aaron, Oliver, Amy, do you guys want to talk about that at all in terms of your work too?
Sure. I mean, I would think to talk about in relationship to my work here in the United States and with Into the Open, a show that we'd done in the Biennale in Venice for the United States, that very much addressed how artists and architects throughout the United States are working with this issue. But actually what I want to rather do is tell you a story from last week. When I was in Lahore, when I was in Pakistan, I came through the most complicated of means there. I went through the State Department, and the State Department is vilified as having created these instabilities in that region and having, if anything, been a force not for peace but for war. And so it was a very complicated rubric by which to arrive there, not just as an American, but as an envoy to Pakistan, a weak state where there's not even a national identity that's cohesive. And but I thought that it was important to go in that way. And the first comments that I heard, if they didn't walk out of the room, was, it's a very privileged discourse that you have to have arrived here talking about peace. But then what played out over the next days and over the course of the week was a very open and honest series of conversations. And so I don't really have an answer to the question, save that with time one can kind of both, make one's concerns known, but also kind of address them directly and see if there's a possibility to continue the conversation.
Okay, I'm just gonna, Deborah, can I grab this question? Hi, I'm Gregory Sale. I have a question about something I see that I really want to compliment you guys on, and I wonder if we could just look at it for a moment. And I see in part a shift beyond just taking a contrary stance that maybe needs to be taken, or sort of speaking up and using your art skills to protest, but really doing the tough work of getting in and trying to hold forums and create forums that allow multiple voices to come to the table, multiple different perspectives, so that it doesn't immediately break down in the ways that we have happening right now in the country between us and them, conservative and liberal, the sort of dichotomies that are just about separation. And so I'm wondering if you see that, how you see that. Is it part of a shift? How did you, any way you want to speak to it, but I think there's something there that I just wanted to underscore and invite some conversation around.
Well, I mean, I think that one issue is, what does it mean to come to the table? And for me, it's been frustrating to see and be part of and do a lot of cultural work where nobody ever goes to the table. I mean, to me, that's the issue. But one sort of little story about that, one of the most inspiring moments in the campaign for me, we had, for the TAMS Year 10 campaign, we had a series of roundtable discussions with the Department of Corrections to discuss the policies and present evidence and argue with them, and just hours of these meetings. And the ex-prisoners who were in TAMS, were at the table, and so were family members and artists. And seeing the ex-prisoners argue against their captors. I mean, these were the people who controlled every aspect of their lives, the warden, and also, to the very high up, to the director. And, at many of these meetings, they made policy points that were like the most critical, they really kind of trapped the IDOC in their own language, and it was just incredible. To me, it was one of the most powerful moments of the campaign.
Yeah, I completely agree. Designing how you bring people to the table is the most important thing. So in our project, it was about bringing people from multiple disciplines who might not usually talk to each other because, city bureaucracies keep each other so separate. And then when they realize that they're actually talking to overlapping populations and that they have a lot more in common with each other than they might have thought of to begin with, even with, especially with architects and designers. What do people from, the criminal justice system think that they can talk to architects about? And it's been that's been the best kind of dialogues. The most, unexpected ones. Yeah.
Good question, Becky.
Well, in my case, it's been quite easy. Nobody owns the discourse of peace, and you would say the same about democracy, I think. So there's no one institution that represents civil society. And so the methodological principle has been to create projects within the larger initiative that enable different voices to come out. But no one of the projects does it well. Each of them fails quite considerably, and we try to evolve them, but each component project completely fails on that level of diversity. But as a larger project, hopefully it reflects that diversity.
I'm not sure if the project I did can be considered as activism. Maybe other projects I did can. But this is more that I provided a kind of framework in order to ask a specific question and then see what is the outcome and produce a film on the basis of this. And the important aspect is to bring it back to the people as well who participated in this project, and to give them the possibility also to use it for own presentations, for teaching, for education, or for whatever. So for me, such pieces work perfect in the system, in the art world, but I definitely want not to keep them within these narrow confines.
I don't know if I can speak for Chen Jieren, but from this presentation that I realized that why Chen Jieren put much edges on the martial law period, and what he wants to question is about that did the Cold War or the martial law really end? Because in terms of the social reality and the historical context and the psychological state and the mentality of a Taiwanese people, we sort of like have that kind of self-censored system inside. So for example, he gave the example, the Empire Borders one, that he bring 9 cases of the applicants when having the interview, but got the verbal humiliation and the abuse from the AIT people. But in Taiwanese society, we talk about privately, basically. But these kind of issue won't talk about in public. So after this incident, Chen Jieren actually set up a website, a weblog, to encourage people to talk about their personal experience. And this is probably the first time that in Taiwan, people in public talk about their experience while having the interview, while having the visa to get the interview and got the humiliation by the consular officers of the United States.
Ana Paula Cohen. I would like to talk to just a comment about what you said about privilege and access. I think it was really interesting what Regina said in her lecture, like that she has more access to information than many people in this country that could have access to education and to information, but they don't. And I would like to suggest that while we keep in this position of victim and power, and while it's so difficult, in the last 10 years I could say that in any roundtable about institution or political engagement or public art, if I am in US or Central Europe, there's always this idea of helping, or that perpetuates the idea of them being victims and we are powerful. And I think the geography idea, the first panel, was very surprising to me as a way of understanding this in a much more dynamic way. Trevor's talk was beautiful in this sense, not talking, I think maybe the idea, the team gave space for this kind of dynamic idea of, and then all the participants with no, I'm not generalizing anyone in this panel, I just feel it's so important to believe that at least in artistic and in discursive level, we can be equal and discuss, and nobody here is a victim, like even if I'm from Brazil or just from Guatemala, and I mean, I feel this always helping the people in Africa or helping the poor people there and here, it always makes me very disturbed. So I just, to make a question, I would like to hear from Oliver Ressler. I think when you start with a question, you open for maybe other perspective of it, and how did you choose the videos? Because you said you had so many and you choose these 8 different thematic things, so I was interested to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, of course, if you raise a single question, then many things are just being repeated. In general, I had something like 2 times more interviews than which are actually being presented in the final installation. So it's a variety of different decisions which lead towards choosing this interview and not another one. So there were certain ideas like to represent certain areas in the video, to have kind of a gender balance, to have people in it with a certain background as a minority or so. So these different things were just being taken into consideration in the editing process, which took more than half a year, I think. So it was quite a demanding process.
Okay. Just to go to your question too, I think this question, so privilege, that idea, is highly problematic in terms of, but it is something that, I think that we have to bear in mind as we go through the day, at what point does this philanthropy become self-serving embrace of one's own power, right? I just think the point's really well taken, and I think a lot of people cringe when too much do-gooderness is going around. Tom had his hand, and then we'll go here.
So I have a question about Taiwanese politics, which is, I understand, we've obviously bombarded this week with information about how freedom of speech doesn't occur in mainland China, and with the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to a dissident in China. And so a critique of the 38 years of martial law can also be seen as, because it's allowed in Taiwan, and because freedom of speech is allowed and the artists can make these kind of statements, can be seen as a way of resisting the Chinese aspiration of absorbing Taiwan. Right? Do you know what I'm saying? From a Taiwanese political perspective, that the more freedom of speech is emphasized, because if you go to Taiwan, which I've been to many times, and I'm a great lover of Taiwanese culture and contemporary art, you're constantly being told how we're different from mainland China. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that the artist's work could be seen from a kind of nationalistic perspective, but progressive nationalistic perspective, as resisting the kind of oppression that is taking place in mainland China.
You mean the relationship between Taiwan and mainland China right now? It's actually ambiguous and ironic. And some people there would like to be united with mainland China, and some parts want to be independent. It's the continuous argument. But in the realistic state, that under the structure of the capitalism, that we have to face the truth that how to cooperate with the mainland China. So in terms of the Chen Jieren's speech about the Cold War structure or the martial law structure, that still maintained in the psychological state in Taiwanese people, and also, of course, it's just like between the China and the United States right now. It's just shift the target from the maybe Russia Union to China right now. So, well, it's very complicated to answer this question. It's very complex, actually, in Taiwanese people's mental states right now. I don't know if I answered your questions.
Did you had a question? Oh, but yeah, but she's...
Susan Platt. I had a question for the panelists. Thank you. The really impressive thing that I noticed is you have made the switch from art training, which does not encourage political action or does not educate people into political action. Was there some catalyst in your life that led you to make this jump into the world?
Is that for me? Go ahead. No, go ahead. Well, I mean, I think that I had been a public policy major in college, and one of the things that you learn as a public policy major, or maybe you don't learn, is that the public policy that gets supported and enacted has nothing to do with its efficacy. It has nothing to do with what's good policy. It really only has to do with the perceptions that people have about the group impacted by the policy. So I actually had always been aware of this, and in fact, that's one of the reasons that I went into art and media, to begin with. So it was a natural, part of my thinking as an artist that's important. But as I kind of describe in my personal story, it was a leap for this issue in a sense, because obviously there is a lot of value to making, to doing the cultural work to change people's attitudes. But I do think that people stop at the cultural work too soon.
I'll let somebody else give you the psychological reasons why I do the work that I do. That I don't think I would like to answer that in this kind of forum. But as an architect, or as someone who works with spatial practices, and someone who teaches design and spatial thinking, I think the most important thing is to define where and how you can act in space, and what is it that defines the spatial problem. And so all the projects that I do, ranging from climate change to schools to criminal justice, is all about really trying to teach people where the spaces are in the city that those kinds of things emerge, and should be looked at and might be hidden unless you live there, right? So I think this matter of privilege is I think it's a non-starter for the kind of work that I do, because I really do think it's important to try and see spaces that you might not ordinarily live in and have a feeling of responsibility and ethical whatever duty towards. So
we're going to take a question from our online community. In fact, you may have gotten word of this, but if you really feel like I haven't gotten to you with a question, you should just ask it online. I'm joking. It might be a faster way in the front door. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Platform spoke of the dirty money of BP. I know they're not here. To the entire panel, though, can arts funding separate itself from dirty money? Is there even such a thing as clean money? Or is the more interesting question to ask what artists or activists do with the money?
It's a money laundering question.
Yes.
Should I answer for Platform?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually, I know John Jordan quite well, who used to be the director of Platform for a couple of years, but he's not involved with Platform anymore. And I really like these activities which take place at the moment against the BP sponsorship at Tate. I mean, in this case, it's really something very important to just get rid of BP money, as BP still uses to wash themselves clean through sponsoring major cultural institutions. So that's, I mean, from my opinion, you cannot even discuss it. It's absolutely clear to get rid of BP and of the money of BP. I mean, yeah, if you take money from the government, certain governmental funds, it can also be argued, there are hundreds of reasons why this is not clean money, of course, but still it's money which is being used and which all of us use, and there's no possibility not to use money, I think.
In the case of our peace project, despite the institutionality of it, we didn't ask our partners for money, for funding. We asked them to be interested and to be willing to be part of a conversation, however they define the nature of that collaboration. So the entire project will, probably cost around $10,000. It's not that much when you think of what's at play in it. At the same time, as Nato reminded us earlier, we've taken advantage of a huge gift economy. Filmmakers and an extraordinary network of people are not being paid for their work, because of our uncomfortability with accepting funding from some of these institutions. So.
Hi, I'm Karen Atlas, and I do want to say, I want to get back to the privilege question. And as a white organizer, I just want to say that I think there is an enormous race and class privilege that we do need to grapple with in the U.S. context, and that one of the things that a lot of activist art is missing is the kind of power analysis that a lot of activists are doing. And of course, they're missing the creativity that the artists are doing, and I think it's something we can learn from each other, but I think this isn't about individual issues, it's about systems, and that the system has given us a race and class privilege that we should be aware of and understand how to use in a beneficial way, but also acknowledge it. And I think it has a lot to do with what it means to be an ally, working in a community that's not your own, and recognizing that you can enter and exit that community in a way that people who it directly is involving can't. And also really having the goal of self-determined change, and I know that a lot of you are working towards that, but what it means to be an ally towards really helping communities determine for themselves what changes and make their own decisions. So I guess it's just a comment I want to make, because I feel like the privilege issue kind of didn't get given the attention it should, and as my colleague just said to me, it's a privilege for a white person, it's a privilege to say, I don't have to talk about privilege. Oftentimes we can say as white people, I don't have to worry about that because I haven't experienced the other side of it.
Karen, can you just real quickly, since it's a good point, can you also talk to the international context, though? Is it just U.S. specific? What about the kind of international language of privilege?
Well, I think the way it plays out, and again, I'm speaking as a U.S. person, so I don't want to speak from my perspective, but I think a lot of international work has U.S. as the intermediary. And I think that's a privileged position. When, I've been involved in cultural exchanges that get intermediated through the U.S. are very different than a South-South exchange. And I think we should recognize also our privilege as intermediaries and use it to be opening doors rather than necessarily, being gatekeepers.
Cool. Okay, do you guys want to respond to that, or should we just seem pretty? It's good. Okay.
Thanks. I'm Steve Lambert, and Lori Jo, I thought it was really great how you were asking artists to sort of, not stop at the doors of government, right? And I've always thought, or one of the thoughts I've heard and thought myself, which is that artists are really good at creating a space to talk about an issue, to presenting it in a new way, changing perspectives, things like that, and that there's other activist groups that are much better at doing that kind of staying there, entrenched on the ground, doing the work, in lobbying, the kinds of things you were talking about. So it seems real obvious to create a partnership. But you're asking artists to go beyond. And so I'm curious, why not just do the partnership? Why should artists do both? And it's not a challenge, I'm just curious what you think.
Well, artists should do both. Artists should work artists should have partnerships. We should do both. But the reason that I was calling for artists to do this work is I do think artists are uniquely qualified to do this work for some of the reasons that I described, but also because there's a lot of work that just isn't being done at all. There's nobody to partner with. And, I don't know, I accept Karen, what Karen is saying about the privilege question, but this, I don't think we have time in the 1 minute left to unravel it all, but, there's, at least the work we did, there's no money for, nobody funded it. And so, it's a very desperate situation. It's very, people are doing it because they're completely motivated and inspired, to deal with this problem. And, I don't know. I guess I don't have time to say more. Did you want to say something to that question?
Which question? The one about
the privilege.
The privilege, yeah. I don't think I can. I would like to continue the discussion with other people in the audience. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Claire, you're gonna have to just make a statement because we got 30 seconds.
I just wanted to recall something that Lori Jo said in a talk I heard her give a few weeks ago in Chicago, and that was, I mean, regarding this privilege thing, it's, you know, that like all the districts that are really affected by the prison system are already doing this work. I mean, that their representatives are doing it, and it's not enough. They need the white middle-class people to also be working on this issue. So it's not like we're doing this thing for these people who can't do for themselves. It's like they have got to have the solidarity.
Hey. We're getting to it. So listen, thanks to the panel so much. Thanks to your great questions. We're going to have lunch. We'll be back in an hour.
I'm sorry, I didn't either.